Let's talk about our practical application here. In this episode, we've up until this point kind of talked about the failure mode of the prodigy, going too narrow and not going wide enough, and how sometimes you have to go narrow in order to be successful, in order to learn to navigate the system that you find yourself in. But that if you go too narrow, you end up squashing everything else in your life to the point where you look around you and what is it really that you have? You might be a great chess player, but you've plateaued, in the example of Beth. So, Brian, talk to us about our practical application here. What can we do? What can we learn with this information?
Yeah, I think we're certainly not saying that focusing on getting extraordinarily good at something is a bad idea. We're certainly not saying that. Like there's a real lesson here that is going to get you social currency. That is going to help you figure out who you are. Confidence and competence build each other, and that will attract like-minded spirits. Like all that is really good, but it's a two-sided coin, and maybe you shouldn't do that to the exclusion of all else. Right? If that's 80% of your time, maybe you should think about spending 20% of your time like, all right, are there people in your orbit that you could be helping come up behind you? Are there people who have helped you that you should maybe express appreciation to, or that you could maintain those relationships? And we see Beth failing those tests. We see her so focused on herself, so focused on her ambition, so focused on her obsessions, and so unwilling to admit anything resembling weakness. Right, that she doesn't really ever have a real conversation with other humans. She doesn't really ever, have a relationship that builds up rather than down.
Yeah, Harry tries to have that one conversation with her that one time, right?
Yeah.
Where he's actually telling her something and asking her about herself, and she just like immediately starts talking about chess again.
Right. And she sees, like, she calls Benny on the same problem later. Like, she has a moment with Benny where they spend the night together, and then, he's immediately starts talking about chess. She sees that he's kind of got the same failure modes, right? He's a little bit of, a little bit obsessive, a little bit all about himself, a little bit all about his ego. And so she's like, yeah, I can't, that doesn't work for me either. But she doesn't recognize how much of that is herself. So I think that just like looking at yourself through the lens of the people around you, especially the lens of the people around you that are trying to help you, the lens of the people around you that sincerely like you and could benefit from your attention. And just think about that a little bit. Like, how are you having an influence on them? Could you share some of what you've learned? Could you share some of your success in a way that builds that up? Up until the last 8 minutes of this entire series, we don't see Beth having that realization. But part of the reason we're rooting for her is because she's charming and talented and driven, and we can sort of recognize and want to celebrate that. And part of the reason that we don't ever want to be her is because we're seeing that she's just leaving devastation in her wake and kind of spiraling herself into an increasingly worse place by refusing to engage with anything other than this sort of competitive one-upmanship ranking-based view of the world that is inherent to chess.
Yeah, there's a complete lack of understanding of what leadership is, if she even understands that it exists at all in this world, right? For her, everybody exists as an individual, and it's a competition. And upon reflection later on, I think she's able to start to see how people were leaders in her life and how that could be a path that she could follow. But Brian, I think you have a simple model here for us, or for being a leader. Is to be a leader is to influence others. It's for people to choose to follow you. And you might also follow them. It's not a one-way road, but people have to choose to follow you. So talk to me about, kind of this simple model for leadership.
I think it's the union of these two things. The way people are going to view you, as we said earlier, is your impact in the world. You're demonstrating some value. You're demonstrating a viewpoint. You're demonstrating that you can make changes, that you can make something better. That's a hook that people will latch on to, that they'll want to be your friend. They'll want to follow you. They'll want to join your team. They'll want to support your initiatives, right? But then the other half of it is what are their individual small interactions with you like? Are you treating them with respect? Are you treating them as if you care about their outcomes as well as your outcomes? Are you taking the time when you don't have to take the time? Are you using the word we instead of the word I? Those interactions are the necessary counterpoint to it. You can be in a room with somebody who's accounted an extraordinary leader or an extraordinarily successful person. And if they're the one in the basketball team that is always taking all of the shots and never passing, that doesn't make you want to be on their team, right? Even if they're amazing, even if they're extraordinary and it's helpful to have them around, that doesn't make them a leader. And
they
so
could be a hero, but they might not be a leader.
They are likely a hero, right? So heroism opens the door to leadership halfway, but empathy and community and engagement is what seals the deal.
Yeah, I love how you said that. It's just so simple. People are going to view you by your relationship with them, by the impact that you have on the world. It's going to be that simple for you. For me, it's about the relationship that you have with somebody is about the little things. It's about the reaching out. It's about responding to their communication. It's about remembering things about them. It's about sacrificing your time, your energy, your resources for them when it's not required of you or when there's nothing you're going to necessarily gain immediately in response to that. It's about listening to them, having empathy for them. And then your impact on the world, this is about your philosophy and your action. Have you developed a viewpoint that's more than just yourself in the world? Have you collaborated and built a mission that's venerable, that's worth following, that creates a better state in the world? And then are you acting on that vision of it? Are people seeing that what you're doing, even if it's just little things, it can start with the little things, but that it's making a difference? I think if we reach the intersection of that, that is the beginning of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really well said. And the reason we do this crazy thing called Wonder Tour is that if those questions are too abstract for you, if those questions are too uncomfortable and difficult to answer, just look at these characters. Who am I today? In my actions today, in that meeting, in that basketball game, in that interaction with a person that I just met, was I Beth? Was I all about me? Was I all about my goals? Was I all about transactions? Or was I Jolene or Mr. Scheidel or somebody who just completely took the time to try to make their life a little bit better because we found some shared humanity, right? You know, who am I being in this situation? And that's all we're doing here is these stories can help us look at it through the lens of like, oh, this is a character archetype that I recognize. Which one of these characters do I want to be? Which one actually was I in the last 10 minutes? Which one actually was I in the last year?
Yeah, Brian. And if it's painful to have that realization, even when you're looking at the Queen's Gambit or your favorite story, then we're going to talk about that in episode 2. What does that mean? What do we do with that? Because the fact that it's painful, that there's a gap that you've recognized, that you aren't the person that you thought you were, you aren't as empathetic, as understanding as you thought, or you aren't viewed that way by others, that's an opportunity.
The good news is you're going to wake up in the morning and have another chance to decide.